In any case, I wanted to talk to you about the crash of 2016, and I'm not talking about my book by the same title. I'm talking about, the very real possibility that between now and the end of the year, or, as I said in the book, I mean, it could be 2017, could even be 2018. I would be astonished if if we could hold on that long, because this whole thing of globalization, again, taking us back to where I started the first hour and an hour ago, this bizarre fantasy that was promoted by libertarians and then Republicans in the Nixon administration and the Reagan administration, that became policy by and large in the Clinton administration with NAFTA, and has been the policy of the United States ever since. This bizarre policy that any country that says we're going to put our own interests first is somehow doing something wrong or immoral or stupid or whatever. I would argue, and it's really weird because this comes from the same people who are pitching selfishness as a virtue, right? The whole basis of libertarian and Ayn Rand theology, I'm reluctant to even call it an ideology because it's never been demonstrated to be successful. But the whole thing behind their theology is personal selfishness. Put yourself first. Right? Altruism is evil. I played the clips from Ayn Rand last week where she was saying, people who put other people ahead of themselves, people who sacrifice for other people, they're not worthy of being called humans. So these are folks who say, you need to put yourself first. But our nation, no, don't put the nation first. Put the big transnational corporations and the billionaires who own them first. That's the message. And the result of that is that we have this interlocked, interlaced world where if one country catches a cold, particularly one of the big countries, I mean, the biggest economy in the world now is China. The United States is now, we're number 2, right? And so you've got this, and then there's, Europe in aggregate, I guess, is maybe bigger than us, but I don't think so, but I'd have to check it out. But in any case, we've got, a couple of major economies. The United States, China, Europe, Russia, India. But China has the ability to bring the whole thing down. They've been growing at 7 to 9% a year for decades because we have been, shrinking at that percentage, more or less, we and the rest of the industrialized world. In terms of jobs and quality of life and standard of living. It doesn't look like we've been shrinking. It looks like we've been staying steady. We've been, treading water. Wages haven't gone up, but productivity has shot up. Corporate profits have shot up. CEO pay is up 600-700%. I mean, all these things are up except for wages because of globalization. Well, there's something pretty scary going on in China that Keith Bradsher is writing about in the August 12th New York Times in the international business section, and it was largely unnoticed. I don't think most people, go into the international business section looking for articles. It has floated to the top, though, in terms of being one of the 10 or 20 most forwarded stories in the New York Times. So you have the Times app, you can easily find it there. It's titled "Trillions in Murky Investments Could Rock China's Economy." Now notice that word trillions. We're talking about as much as a third of all the investment and banking in China right now. Let me just share this with you. This is Keith Bradsher writing in the August 12th New York Times. A Shanghai investment firm is offering a fat return of Shanghai is a city in China, offering a fat return of up to 10% a year, handily beating both the local stock market and the paltry payouts from bank accounts. It requires a minimum deposit of about $15, making it accessible to just about anyone. Investors can pull out in as little as 7 days. Best of all, the money is guaranteed. Wow. I mean, wouldn't you do that if you had any money at 10% guaranteed? There's just one catch. Investors know surprisingly little about what they're buying. He's using this one particular company, State Gold Treasure, as an example, but it's part of an industry in China. And he says they will not release their details, including the complex's address that they are theoretically investing your money in. He writes, over the last 5 years, Chinese investors have plowed at least $2.8 trillion into buying such funds from banks alone. So the banks are buying the funds, and then they're reselling them to their customers. So when the customers want their money, they go to the bank and they say, give us the money back, and then the bank has to go to the fund and say, give us the money back. And if the fund is gone or bankrupt, then the bank goes down. This is starting to sound a lot like the collateralized debt obligations and the derivatives that U.S. banks were holding in 2007. After quintupling since 2011, these investments, known as wealth management products, now total an amount roughly equal to more than 1/3 of China's annual economic output. And that is just the funds distributed by banks. And again, the banks aren't creating these. They're just retailers. Banks also increasingly use the funds to raise money instead of more stable deposits. The extra investment cash allows banks to make loans at a much faster clip than the deposits would allow. But if investors suddenly demanded their money back, banks would be in a financial bind. China's wealth management products are not stocks, they're not bonds, they're not mutual funds. But Chinese are treating them as if they're savings deposits. But unlike bank deposits, they are uninsured. They are also typically structured so that the banks are not responsible if the investments fail. Technology has made it easier for firms other than banks like State Gold Treasury to sell the products online and through smartphone apps. Wealth management products account for up to 1/3 of the money raised at midsize and smaller banks. So here we have, and it sounds to me like what's going on is that these are Ponzi schemes. Real simple. I mean, how do you produce a 10% guaranteed return year after year? When you cannot, I mean, there's virtually nothing you can invest in right now that produces a 10% return. How do you do that? You take the money from current investors and use it to pay back old investors. This is what Alfred Ponzi did in Pie Alley, 62 Pie Alley, Boston, Massachusetts, back in, 1928, I think it was? And we refer to them now as Ponzi schemes. At the height of his Ponzi scheme, I read about this in the last hours of Ancient Sunlight. At the height of his Ponzi scheme, he was bringing in something like, hundreds of thousands, maybe $1 million a day. They had all these people there just counting money. It was an all-cash business. And now we refer to these things as Ponzi schemes, and it sure looks to me like at least $3 trillion in China is tied up in something that might, and probably does, is functionally a Ponzi scheme. And so what happens if China's economy hiccups? Well, China might, the centralized, controlled economy, the communist leaders of the country may think that they have, enough power to control the economy and prevent anything from happening. And in an otherwise stable world, that may well be true. But if the U.S. stock market drops 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 points, if demand starts collapsing in Europe for Chinese products and in the United States, you're going to see this whole thing go down.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And when it goes down, it's going to take us with it. This is scary stuff. We'll be back.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.